My name is Elena Ross. I'm 27. At 9:07 on a Tuesday night in November, I was standing in my parents' kitchen in Glenview, Illinois, with a $4,312 tuition bill in my hand and $118 in my checking account, and my mother was on the phone with my sister, laughing, while I waited for her to get off so I could ask for help paying for the one class that stood between me and my degree. She knew I was there. She looked right at me. She held up one finger. That one finger meant wait. It always meant wait. It had been meaning wait for 22 years. I waited 11 minutes. I know because I watched the microwave clock blink from 9:07 to 9:18, and I memorized it the way you memorize things when something inside you already knows it's the last time you're going to let yourself be made to wait. When she finally hung up, she didn't say sorry. She opened the refrigerator, pulled out a container of leftovers, and said without turning around, "Tiffany got into the administrative program at Cascade Medical. We're so proud of her." I said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about my tuition." She turned then, and the look on her face, I know that look. I have been studying that look my whole life the way a meteorologist studies pressure systems, trying to predict the storm before it arrives. It's a look that is not quite contempt and not quite pity. It's something worse than either. It's the look you give someone you have already decided doesn't quite count. Elena. She set the container on the counter. We've been over this. College is something you work toward. You don't just expect people to hand it to you. I'm not asking you to hand it to me. I'm asking for help with one class. $4,300. I'll pay it back. You'll pay it back. She repeated it with that precise inflection, not a question, not an affirmation, just those four words floated back to me like something slightly ridiculous. And how exactly do you plan to do that on a dishwasher's salary? That word, dishwasher. She said it the way other people say mistake. I also work the night cashier shift at Elena. My father's voice came from the living room. Flat, tired. The sound of a man who had made a lifetime career out of not being in the room when things happened. Your mother's had a long day. I looked at her. She was already opening the container. The conversation for her was over. Mom, my voice came out steadier than I felt. My hands, holding that tuition bill, had gone completely cold. Tiffany got the full $120,000 education fund, the one Grandma Rose left for both of us. I got nothing from it. I've never asked you about that directly because I didn't want to start a fight, but I'm asking now. I need help. I need $4,312, and I need to know why my tuition fund went entirely to my sister. The kitchen went very quiet. My mother put her fork down. She turned around slowly, and there was something new in her expression. Not the dismissal look, but something colder, something prepared. I don't know where you're getting your information, she said, but your grandmother's fund was allocated based on need. Tiffany needed it. You. She gestured vaguely, at me, at the space I occupied. You've always been the capable one, the one who figures things out. We never worried about you. You never worried about me, I said. That's what you're calling it. Elena, don't you twist my words. I'm not twisting anything. I'm repeating them back exactly. You have always done this. Her voice climbed slightly, controlled but climbing. You have always made everything into a grievance. Your sister works hard. She applies herself, and she doesn't stand in the kitchen at 9 o'clock at night, making her mother feel like a criminal for loving her children. I'm not making you feel anything, Mom. I'm asking a factual question about $120,000. Get out of my kitchen! It wasn't a scream. My mother doesn't scream. It was the kind of voice that is quieter than a scream, but carries further. The voice that has learned over decades that controlled fury lands harder than volume. I looked at her for a moment. Then I looked down at the tuition bill in my hand. Then I folded it carefully, the way you fold something you know you're going to need later, tucked it into the back pocket of my jeans, and walked out of that kitchen. My father did not look up from the television. Before I tell you what happened next, before I take you through the 9 years between that night and the moment my sister's wedding fell apart in front of 200 people at the Grand Monarch Hotel in Chicago, I want to ask you something. If stories about standing up for yourself, about what happens when you stop waiting for people who were never going to see you to finally look in your direction, if that means something to you, please hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time it is there. I want to know who's in this room with me tonight, because I've been alone in a lot of rooms, and it helps to know I'm not alone in this one. Let me take you back 8 years. I was 19, and I had just failed my second midterm in the same semester, and I was sitting outside Dr. Samuel Henderson's office on the fourth floor of the Harwick Sciences Building at Northeastern Illinois University at 3:40 in the afternoon, waiting for him to come back from a faculty meeting so I could tell him I was withdrawing from his Introduction to Health Informatics course. I'd been working the dishwasher shift at Caruso's Italian Kitchen on Kedzie from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. 4 nights a week to make rent. I was sleeping 5 hours a night maximum. The reading wasn't getting done. The assignments weren't getting done. I had $847 in my account, a cracked phone screen, and a backpack with a broken zipper held shut with a binder clip. I was not expecting Dr. Henderson to know my name. He was 63 years old, a small man with a silver beard and bifocals and a thermos he carried everywhere, and he came down the hallway reading something on his clipboard and almost walked past me. Then he stopped, looked up and said, "Elena Ross, you're here." "I'm withdrawing from your class," I said. He sat down in the chair beside me, not across the desk, beside me in the hallway. And he said, "Tell me why." I told him. All of it. The dishwashing, the night shifts, the tuition bill, the $120,000 that had gone to my sister for a program she'd started and abandoned inside of 6 months. I didn't plan to say all of it. I'd only planned to say I can't keep up with the reading. But he had the kind of listening face that pulls things out of you, not intrusive, just patient, the way a cup is patient. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been teaching for 31 years. In 31 years, I have learned to spot two kinds of students. Ones who are here because they expect a credential, and ones who are here because they need to understand something." He tapped the clipboard. "Your midterm answers were wrong, but they were wrong in interesting ways. That means you're thinking, you're just not sleeping." He got me a department emergency scholarship, $2,200, enough to finish the semester. He also gave me a research assistant position in his lab for the following spring. 15 hours a week, $13.50 an hour, flexible scheduling. On my last day in his office before winter break, I was packing up my files and he was at his desk grading. And he said, without looking up, "You know what I tell students who've been told they're the reliable one, the capable one, the one nobody needs to worry about?" He finally looked up, over his bifocals. "I tell them that's not a compliment. That's a description of abandonment dressed up as praise." I didn't say anything. My throat had gone strange. "You're going to build something," he said. "I don't know what it is yet. But pay attention to the problems that make you angry, because those are the ones you're meant to solve." I carry that with me. I carry it the way you carry something small that turns out to be load-bearing. That night in the kitchen was the first betrayal I named out loud. There had been others before it, smaller ones, the kind that accumulate the way water damage does, invisible until the wall caves. I was 8 when Tiffany got the new bedroom set and I got her old one. I was 13 when my parents took Tiffany to see Hamilton in Chicago and told me it was a school night, even though we had the same school night. I was 17 when Tiffany crashed the family car into a utility pole, and my father's first words were, "Is the car okay?" And when I got a parking ticket 3 months later, I was grounded for a week and made to write a letter of apology to the family for the embarrassment. But the tuition fund, That was the one I couldn't make smaller in my head. $120,000 from my grandmother's estate, left to both granddaughters. Split, according to the original letter Grandma Rose had sent my parents in 2009, 60,000 each. I found that letter by accident, 4 years after that kitchen confrontation, tucked inside a manila folder in a box of old tax documents my Aunt Cecilia let me look through when she was helping me file my own returns. But I didn't know the specifics that November night. I only knew the fund existed and that I had received none of it. My mother's version of events, the one she told extended family, the one she told her church group, the one I learned about secondhand from my cousin Jade, was that Elena had been too proud to ask for help and had chosen to work her way through school as a form of personal growth. In this version, Elena was admirable. In this version, Elena was not the one who stood in the kitchen with a tuition bill and was told to wait 11 minutes for a phone call with her sister to conclude before being dismissed. In this version, there was no $120,000. I did not argue with this version publicly. I was 22 and exhausted, and I had learned, somewhere in the calculus of growing up in that house, that arguing with my mother in public was like throwing paper at a fire. It just gave her more to burn with. I paid the $4,312 tuition bill over 4 months. I took on an extra dishwashing shift. I ate a lot of rice and canned tomatoes. I missed a birthday party, a cousin's graduation dinner, and one of Becca's art shows. Becca, who had been my best friend since 7th grade, and who showed up at my apartment 2 days after that kitchen night with a rotisserie chicken, a six-pack, and the specific expression of someone who is not going to tell you it's going to be fine because she knows you're smart enough to know it might not be. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Finish," I said. "And then?" "I don't know yet." I was picking at the chicken. "Dr. Henderson said to pay attention to the problems that make me angry." Becca handed me a bottle. "So what makes you angry?" I thought about it. "The way healthcare data is siloed," I said. "Small clinics can't talk to hospital systems. Patients fall through the gaps. People die of things that were preventable if someone had had access to someone else's file." Becca looked at me for a long moment. "You know you said that like a person who's going to solve it." "I said it like a person who's hungry and annoyed." "Same energy," she said. "Same energy." I graduated in May with honors, on a morning my parents attended, and in the audience for 4 minutes before my mother announced she had a migraine and needed to leave. Tiffany was not there. I stood on the stage in my rented regalia and found Becca in the crowd and focused on her face. She was crying. She was also holding a sign that said, "Doctor." Elena Vance, incoming in glitter letters, which was both premature and deeply incorrect, but which I loved with my whole heart. The research assistant position with Dr. Henderson turned into a full-time research coordinator role. That turned into a software analyst position at Corridor Health Consulting when I was 24, where I spent 2 years building data integration tools for community health clinics and watching, up close, exactly how broken the system was. Patient records in 4 incompatible formats. Billing data that couldn't communicate with clinical data. Clinic directors who knew the problem existed and had no technical solution and no budget to find one. I wrote a 12-page paper on the structural inefficiencies. Dr. Henderson read every draft. He left comments in pencil, actual pencil, in the margins. And his final comment on the last page was, "This isn't an academic paper. This is a business plan. Act accordingly." I incorporated MedBridge solutions when I was 26, working nights and weekends from a spare bedroom in Becca's apartment while I kept my analyst salary to cover operating costs. I am not going to make this sound like a smooth journey. There were 4 months where I made no salary at all and paid myself $400 a week from the business account and ate a great deal of instant ramen and wondered, at 2 a.m. with my laptop open and my eyes burning, whether I had miscalculated everything. Then Summit Valley Health signed a $2.8 million contract for MedBridge's clinic integration platform. I sat in my car in the Summit Valley Health parking lot on the morning after the signing and did not cry exactly, but I sat there for 26 minutes without moving. And somewhere in those 26 minutes, I thought about that Tuesday night at 9:07 in my parents' kitchen, and about a microwave clock blinking, and about one finger held up that meant wait, and I thought, I waited. And I used the time well. My mother found out about the Summit Valley contract in a way that I can only describe as architecturally perfect in its irony. She read about it in a regional business journal. Becca sent me the screenshot. The article mentioned Elena Vance, 26-year-old CEO of MedBridge Solutions, and included a photo from the contract signing. My mother called me that evening at 6:51 p.m., the first call she had initiated in 4 months. I saw the article, she said. I know, I said. You could have told us. I could have, I said. There was a pause. Then, and this is the part that Becca and I have replayed probably 100 times, my mother said, You know, I always pushed you girls to be independent. I never coddled you. I think that's what made you who you are. I looked at my phone. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment, because I've heard other people in my situation describe this as rage, or as grief, or as some complicated hybrid of the two. What I felt was something quieter and more structural. It was the feeling of watching someone build a false load-bearing wall and knowing with complete certainty that the house cannot stand on it, and also knowing that pointing this out will accomplish nothing because the person doing the building believes the wall is real. Okay, Mom, I said. You should come to dinner sometime, she said. Tiffany would love to see you. I'll see, I said. I had not seen Tiffany in 14 months at that point, and I want to be careful about what I tell you here because the story I'm about to tell you about my sister is not one I wanted to be in. It is not a story I went looking for. It is a story that came looking for me. It found me on a Wednesday in March at 10:23 in the morning when I got a call from Marcus Webb, the CEO of Ridgeline Clinical Partners, a mid-sized clinic group in the northern Chicago suburbs. We had been in preliminary talks about a MedBridge integration contract for 6 weeks. He was, I thought, a likely client. Elena, he said, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know I'm asking because I respect your work, and I want to give you the chance to respond before we proceed. The skin on the back of my neck went cold. Go ahead. We have someone on staff here who knows you. She was hired about 8 months ago as a senior administrative director. She presented credentials, including a master's degree in healthcare administration from Northwestern and an active administrator license through the Illinois Department of Public Health. He paused. Her name is Tiffany Ross. She's told several of our staff members that you have a history of professional misconduct, that you misrepresent your qualifications, that MedBridge's contract with Summit Valley was obtained through personal connections rather than merit. The world was very quiet for a moment. Marcus, I said, can you tell me when Tiffany Ross was hired? October of last year. And her Northwestern degree. Has your HR department verified it directly through Northwestern's registrar? Another pause, longer this time. We verified through a third-party credential service. I would encourage you to contact Northwestern's registrar directly, I said. I would also encourage you to request her Illinois Administrator License Number and verify it through the IDPH licensing portal. I'll send you the verification links. I kept my voice even. My hands, under the desk, were pressed flat against my knees. I'd also be happy to send you the full due diligence report from Summit Valley's procurement team. The contract was awarded through a 14-week evaluation process with 4 competing vendors. Elena. His voice had changed. Are you telling me? I'm telling you to verify, I said, and I would appreciate a call back when you have. I hung up. I sat in my chair. My office is on the 7th floor and has windows that face east, And at 10:23 in the morning in March, the light comes in at an angle that makes everything look very clear and very bright. And I sat in that light and thought about my sister and about a phone call my mother had taken for 11 minutes while I stood in her kitchen holding a tuition bill. It took Marcus Webb 48 hours to call me back. The Northwestern Registrar has no record of a Tiffany Ross in any graduate program, he said. The administrator license number she provided belongs to a Dr. Patricia Annucci in Joliet. His voice was careful and controlled, but underneath it I could hear the particular sound of a person recalibrating something they thought they understood. We've engaged our legal team. I owe you an apology. You don't, I said. You gave me the chance to respond. That was the right thing to do. After I hung up, I opened my laptop, opened a new document, and began writing down everything I knew. Every date, every name, every number, every conversation I could recall with enough specificity to be useful. My mother had a signature line she used when things didn't go Tiffany's way. When Tiffany abandoned the administrative program at Cascade Medical. When Tiffany's first marriage, a brief, disastrous 8-month thing I'd only heard about from Jade, ended in a legal filing. When Tiffany called at odd hours, and my mother answered every time, voice dropping into that particular gentle register she never used with me. The line was, "She just needs the right opportunity. When she finds the right opportunity, she'll flourish." The right opportunity, it turned out, had been Ridgeline Clinical Partners. And the man who owned Ridgeline Clinical Partners, a divorced, wealthy, 54-year-old named Gregory Marsh, had become, over the 8 months of Tiffany's fraudulent employment there, her fiancé. They announced their engagement in January. The wedding was set for April, the Grand Monarch Hotel, Chicago. 200 guests. My mother called me about it at 7:33 in the morning on a Saturday, her voice bright with the particular brightness of someone delivering news they know will land. "I hope you'll come," she said. "Family should be together for things like this." I thought about Marcus Webb's phone call, about the IDPH licensing portal, about a third-party credential service that hadn't done its job. "I'll be there," I said. What happened in the weeks before the wedding is something I want to tell you carefully, because it matters how things happened and in what order. Becca called me 2 days after my mother's Saturday morning call. She said, "Tell me everything." I told her everything. There was a silence. Then Becca said, in the tone of someone who is being very deliberate, "Elena, does Gregory Marsh know?" "Not yet." "Does he know she doesn't have the master's degree?" "Not yet." "Does he know she's using his business as a reference for credentials she doesn't have?" "Not yet." "Does he know," Becca said, very carefully, "that Medbridge's platform, your platform, has records from Ridgeline's own system? Because you were in contract talks with them for 6 weeks. You ran a preliminary data audit as part of the evaluation process. You have access logs." I stopped, because she was right. As part of the due diligence evaluation for the potential Medbridge Ridgeline contract, I had conducted a preliminary technical audit of Ridgeline's administrative data systems. It was standard practice. And in those access logs, the documentation of user permissions, credential entries, system access records, there was a data trail. An administrative director's credentials had been entered into the system at the time of hire. Those credentials had a paper trail. My system, my data, my documentation. I sat back in my chair. "I need to call Dr. Henderson," I said. Dr. Henderson was 67 now and had retired from teaching the previous year. He was growing tomatoes, he had told me, and reading books he'd been putting off for decades, and consulting occasionally for a healthcare policy nonprofit on Milwaukee Avenue. I called him at 4:15 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in late March, and he picked up on the third ring. I explained the situation, all of it, the fake credentials, the licensing fraud, the way my sister had infiltrated my client's company and used that position to undermine my professional reputation. The access logs in Medbridge's system, the wedding in 3 weeks at the Grand Monarch. He was quiet for a moment. You know what you have, he said. I know. And you know what you need to do with it. I think so. The question, he said, is whether you do it the right way. He connected me to a woman named Patricia Osei, an attorney who specialized in professional fraud and licensing violations. She was 41, precise, and when I walked into her office on March 24th and spread my documentation across her conference table, the Medbridge access logs, the IDPH licensing verification, Marcus Webb's written statement, the Northwestern Registrar's confirmation. She looked at everything for 4 minutes without speaking. Then she said, "How do you want to handle this?" "I want Gregory Marsh to know the truth before he marries her." "You could report to the IDPH directly. She'll face licensing penalties." "That will take months. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Patricia Osei looked at me steadily. "Mr. Marsh is paying for Medbridge's preliminary audit report as part of his contract evaluation. That report includes administrative credential verification as standard documentation." She let that sit for a moment. "Which means he is entitled to receive it, through completely standard business channels, before the contract, or anything else, proceeds." I looked at her. "You're not exposing your sister," she said. "You're delivering a client document." "To a man who happens to be about to marry her." "To a prospective client," she said, "as part of a contractual process." I thought about Becca's rotisserie chicken on the night after that kitchen confrontation. I thought about Dr. Henderson's pencil comments in the margins of my 12-page paper. I thought about standing at a graduation ceremony with $118 in my checking account and a sign in the audience in glitter letters. "Send the report," I said. "I want to tell you about the week before the wedding. My mother called on Monday to ask whether I'd confirmed my attendance. I said yes. She said Tiffany was so excited. The venue was stunning. Gregory had been so generous with the whole arrangement. Her voice was the voice of someone who has decided that happiness is a thing that belongs to one child and is witnessed by another. He's a wonderful man, my mother said. He gave Tiffany exactly the opportunity she needed. There it was, the right opportunity. I gripped my phone. "I'm sure," I said. On Wednesday, Becca came to my apartment with a bottle of wine and a legal pad, and we sat at my kitchen table and she helped me rehearse every possible scenario. What if Gregory already knew? What if the report hadn't been delivered? What if Tiffany had found a way to intercept it? What if my mother confronted me at the reception? What if— "This one?" Becca said gently. "What if Gregory knew and had decided he didn't care?" "Then I go home," I said. "I go home, and I've done what I could do, and I go home." "And if it works?" I looked at the legal pad. "Then something true has happened, and I've just been there to witness it." Becca filled my glass. "You know what Dr. Henderson would say? He'd say pay attention to the problems that make you angry." "No," she said. "He'd say you already solved this one. You just haven't been to the presentation yet." The Grand Monarch Hotel is on Michigan Avenue, 42 floors of glass and limestone, and the ballroom where Tiffany Ross was married, or was going to be married, to Gregory Marsh on the third Saturday of April was on the second floor off the main lobby, behind a pair of 12-foot oak doors with brass handles. By the time I arrived at 5:45 p.m., the room was already set for 212 guests. Round tables covered in ivory linens, tall arrangements of white peonies and eucalyptus at every centerpiece, a string quartet playing near the far wall, and a raised platform at the front where the ceremony would take place in 45 minutes. I wore a navy dress. I had not told my mother I was coming early. I found my seat, table 14 near the left wall, with a partial view of the head table, and I sat down and I looked at the room. I looked at the flowers. I looked at the 200 people filtering in, finding their places, picking up their programs. I looked at the staff moving along the edges of the room. efficient, and invisible the way wedding staff always are. I looked at my mother, at the front of the room, in a champagne-colored dress, speaking to someone I didn't recognize with the kind of full, generous attention she deployed when she wanted to be seen being gracious. I looked at my father, beside her, in a suit he'd worn to every formal event for the last decade, and he looked across the room at some point and found my face, and for a moment something moved across his expression, something I couldn't name. And then he looked away. At 6:05, Gregory Marsh entered the ballroom through a side door with his groomsmen, and even from 60 feet I could see it. The expression. The controlled, deliberate blankness of a person carrying something heavy in their chest who has decided not to put it down yet. He knew. He knew. And he had come anyway. And I did not know what that meant. The ceremony started at 6:12. Tiffany came down the aisle in a dress that cost more than 3 months of my first salary, and she was radiant with it, genuinely radiant, the way my sister has always been radiant when she is at the center of something, when the room is organized around her, when she is the axis the story turns on. My mother watched her from the front row with tears on her face. I watched Gregory Marsh. He said his vows. He took her hand. The officiant said the words. They kissed. 200 people applauded, and the string quartet played, and I sat at table 14, with my hands in my lap, and I breathed. The reception began at 7 o'clock. By 7:40, my mother had found me. Elena, she said it warmly, the way she said my name when we were in public, and there were witnesses. I'm so glad you came. Did you see how beautiful she was? She was, I said. I just feel so. She pressed a hand to her chest, a gesture I recognized, the gesture of a woman who has made a performance of feeling. I raised her to be independent, to fight for what she wants. But standing here today, watching her find this wonderful man, this wonderful life, she shook her head. Why does it feel like something's missing? She said it to me, but she was looking past me, at the room, at the guests, at the tableau of the event she had stage managed and attended and would describe for years. I looked at her. I don't know, Mom, I said. At 8:15, I saw it happen. Gregory Marsh was at the head table when his best man, a heavy-set man named Dennis, I'd been introduced to briefly, leaned over and said something in his ear. Gregory nodded, once, set down his fork and stood up. The room didn't go quiet all at once. It went quiet in sections, the way a crowd goes quiet when they sense something is coming but don't know what. Gregory Marsh walked to the front of the room. He took the microphone from the band leader, who stepped aside with a look of polite confusion. Gregory was 54 years old and had built 3 healthcare businesses from the ground up, and he stood at the front of that room with 212 people watching him, and he spoke with the exact calm of someone who has had 48 hours to make a decision and has made it. I want to thank everyone for being here, he said. I want to thank the staff of the Grand Monarch for their work. I want to thank the families who traveled for this. He paused. I need to share something that is going to be difficult to hear, and I'm going to ask everyone's patience. The room was completely silent. 3 days ago, I received a standard due diligence report from a vendor my company has been evaluating for a data integration contract. The report included, as is standard practice, a verification of administrative credentials for Ridgeline staff. He looked down at something in his hand. The report confirmed what I had not known until that moment. My wife, he paused briefly on the word, does not hold a master's degree in healthcare administration from Northwestern University. The credential was fabricated. Additionally, the Illinois administrator license she presented at the time of hiring belongs to another individual. You could hear the ventilation system. You could hear the string quartet, who had been playing something soft near the wall, stop playing one by one until there was silence. Tiffany, at the head table, was completely still. I want to be clear, Gregory continued, his voice unchanged, that I'm not saying this to humiliate anyone. I am saying this because the people in this room, our families, our friends, deserve honesty. And because the vendor who provided this report has been subjected to professional defamation within my organization, and that defamation was orchestrated by the person seated at this table. He looked, briefly, toward Tiffany. I've spoken with my legal team. The appropriate regulatory bodies will be notified. I take full responsibility for the failures in our hiring process that allowed this to go undetected. He set the microphone down. He walked back to the head table. He pulled out his chair, picked up his jacket, and walked through a side door. He did not look at Tiffany. What happened in the room after that happened the way things happen in shock, slowly and all at once. Voices starting. A woman near the back saying audibly, "Oh my God." Someone at table 7 standing up. A child, somewhere, asking a question that got no answer. Tiffany sat at the head table with her hands flat on the ivory linen and her face doing something I had never seen my sister's face do before. She looked lost. Not cornered, not angry. Lost. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something that was not satisfaction, that was not triumph, that was something more like grief for what the situation was and had always been. Then I heard my mother. She was at the front of the room, on her feet, and her voice had gone to the controlled fury register I knew from kitchen counters and November nights. And she said, "I don't know what this man thinks he's doing, but this family? Patricia." My Aunt Cecilia beside her put a hand on her arm. My mother shook it off. "This family has worked for everything we have. We have sacrificed for our children. I raised my daughters to be independent, to be resourceful. Mom." I heard my own voice before I decided to speak. She turned. And here is the moment I want to describe carefully because it is the one I've thought about most often in the months since. The room was quiet, and 200 people were watching, and I was standing at table 14 in my navy dress, and I looked at my mother across all those white peonies and ivory linens, and I said, "Grandma Rose's trust allocated $60,000 to each of her granddaughters. I have the original letter. I have the trust documents. I have the bank statements showing the full $120,000 was transferred to Tiffany's account over 18 months. I kept my voice level. I'm not saying this to cause harm. I'm saying it because you just used the word sacrifice in a room full of people, and I need that word to mean something real." My mother's face did something complex. Several expressions moved across it in quick succession: fury, deflection, calculation. And then she said, her voice dropping, "You have no idea what you're talking about. You never understood how much I did for this family." "I understand exactly," I said. "I just don't need you to keep telling me it was for me." My father, 10 feet away, sat in his chair. He did not stand. He did not speak. He looked at the tablecloth. And my Aunt Cecilia, who had known about the trust letter because she'd let me look through those tax documents 4 years ago, who had never said anything because saying something felt like detonating something she wasn't sure she had the right to detonate. My Aunt Cecilia looked at my mother and said quietly, "She's right, Patricia. You know she's right." My mother opened her mouth. Then she closed it. I picked up my clutch from the table. I looked at the room, at the 200 people in it, at the flowers, at the untouched plates, at my sister still sitting at the head table with her hands flat on the linen. I did not go to Tiffany. I thought about it. I stood at the edge of the room for 2 breaths, and I thought about it, and I decided that there was nothing I could say to my sister that was more honest than what had already been said by people who were not me, and that sometimes the most truthful thing you can do in a room is leave it. I walked out through the oak doors. The lobby of the Grand Monarch was cool and hushed, and my heels clicked on the marble, and the doorman held the door for me, and I walked out onto Michigan Avenue at 8:37 p.m. on a Saturday in April, and the lake wind was coming off the water, and it was cold enough that I wished I'd brought a coat, and I thought about Dr. Henderson telling me to pay attention to the problems that make me angry, and I thought about Becca's glitter sign, and I stood on the sidewalk for about 30 seconds and breathed the lake air, and then I called a car. In the weeks after the wedding, Things happened in the particular slow cascade of institutional processes. The Illinois Department of Public Health opened a licensing fraud investigation. Ridgeline Clinical Partners terminated Tiffany's employment and filed a civil complaint. Marcus Webb, who I heard from directly, retained Patricia Osei's firm. The vendor that had provided the faulty third-party credential verification faced its own inquiry. Gregory Marsh sent me an email 3 days after the wedding. It was 4 sentences. It said, "He appreciated my work, he understood the difficult position I had been in, he intended to pursue the appropriate legal remedies, and he hoped we could revisit the Medbridge Ridgeline contract evaluation when things had settled." I responded in 2 sentences. I said I was glad the documentation had been useful, and I would welcome that conversation. My mother did not call me for 6 weeks. When she did call, she did not mention the wedding. She talked about a recipe she was trying, and whether I'd seen the new park renovation on Greenview. I listened. I said, in the appropriate places. At the end of the call, she said, "I hope we can all move forward." I said, "I'll be in touch, Mom." And I meant it. In the particular way you mean something when you're the one deciding the terms. My father called me, separately, 10 days later. He said, "Elena, I'm sorry." Just those 3 words. Nothing after them. The line was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I know that's not enough." And I said, "I know you know." And we sat on the phone in silence for about a minute before he said goodnight. That phone call is the one I've thought about most. Not the wedding, not the kitchen at 9:07, not any of the rest of it. That 1 minute of silence where my father and I both knew exactly what had not happened for 27 years and didn't pretend that naming it in one phone call undid it, but also didn't pretend the naming was nothing. It is 6 months later now. I am in my apartment on the north side of Chicago, the one with the east-facing windows, and it is early morning, and there is coffee brewing, and on my desk there is a framed photograph of me and Dr. Henderson at the Medbridge launch event 2 years ago. The one where he wore a tie and complained about it the entire evening and told me the canapes were the only reason he'd attended. He's teaching again, 1 class a semester. He says he got bored of the tomatoes. Becca is opening her own studio in April. Photography. She's been doing it on the side for years and the portfolio is extraordinary, and I told her 6 months ago that the only reason she hadn't done it yet was that she'd spent too much time watching out for the people she loved instead of watching out for herself. She told me that was the most hypocritical thing anyone had ever said to her. We both laughed for a long time. Medbridge signed 2 new regional contracts this fall. I am still the CEO. I am also, as of 3 weeks ago, serving on the advisory board for a healthcare equity initiative at Dr. Henderson's University, which has a clunky name and an enormous amount of work to do, and which I find, every time I'm in the room for a meeting, exactly as important and as difficult as it should be. I have a plant on my windowsill that I have kept alive for 8 months, which is a personal record. If you're watching this, I want to tell you something specific. Not something that sounds good in a quote, but something I actually had to learn. The capable one is not a compliment. It is a permission slip that other people write for themselves. Permission to need nothing from you, to give nothing to you, and to call the arrangement your strength. You are allowed to need things. You are allowed to ask. You are allowed to stop performing your own resilience for an audience that feeds on it. The thing I did that changed everything was not the confrontation. It was not the data report. It was not the wedding. The thing I did was fold that tuition bill and put it in my back pocket and leave the kitchen. Not because I was giving up, but because I finally understood that the person I needed to stop waiting for was not my mother. It was myself. Stop waiting. Outside my window right now, there is a wind coming off Lake Michigan, the same kind of wind that was there on Michigan Avenue the night I walked out of the Grand Monarch. And the morning light is doing what it does in Chicago in October, coming in flat and gold and honest, without any softening. I sit here with my coffee and I don't feel like I won anything. I feel like I finally stopped losing. If you've ever been called the capable one, when what you actually were was abandoned, type I was capable in the comments. Or if you were the one who finally stopped waiting for the apology, the acknowledgement, the permission to matter, type I stopped waiting. Both are true. Both cost something. Both were worth it. If this story stayed with you, check the description for more stories like this one. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Take care of yourself this week.